I want to move on to an issue that is still very relevant, obviously, to trade between Scotland and Northern Ireland, particularly as the gateway to the Republic of Ireland, but it also has implications for trade with the rest of the EU, and that's possible customs changes from the 1st of January 2022. Now, obviously, some of the plans have been postponed until possibly the middle of next year, but others will go ahead. Can I ask the panel, how significant will the impact be and how ready is Scotland to manage these particular changes? And if in particular you have any specific comments on the unique challenges we have regarding trade between Scotland and Northern Ireland. And maybe I could put that question first of all to Robert Windsor, as I know the Association have published material on the issue of the customs changes from January 2022.
Right, the customs changes coming in on 1st of January are very significant. In effect, you are seeing the UK reimposing full customs controls on all goods coming from the European Union into the UK. And I'm dealing here with the UK as a whole. I don't want to separate Scotland out from this matter because it is a mainland issue, if you like. What you will see is the imposition of the GVMS system for the road freight environment in particular. You will see the need for a full customs declaration. You will see the need for greater compliance with rules of origin, because those have been largely overlooked. You will also see the disappearance of the delayed declaration system, which will be replaced with a proper EIDR system, and you will see the requirements for SBS goods, which is foodstuffs and products of animal origin, for the IPAFS declaration, as we call it. It is basically a pre-notification of those goods coming into the UK before they're shipped. It is quite a lot of bureaucracy to go through. And as I said earlier in my evidence, my view and the association's view is these are more significant impact on the UK as a whole than what we saw on the 1st of January this year. I have to be honest, the Northern Ireland situation is extremely complex. We've already had problems being caused by the basically import agents should not be using what we call chief, which is the customs handling of import and export freight, and that is tied to the Northern Ireland Protocol. And we are seeing, and that's for imports to Northern Ireland, and it's been replaced with the Customs Declaration Service. And the Customs Declaration Service is a much more difficult system. Just to give you an idea, in a chief entry, a full entry is about 55 data fields. We're moving to 88 on a CDS entry, so you see there's a lot more data required. Specific problems, Scotland, Northern Ireland, well, it is actually the increased disruption that is stemming from the imposition of CDS at the moment. I'm afraid it is a technical subject, and I'm afraid I've been doing this for 45 years, and even I can't get my head around it sometimes. It is a very technical and complex issue. And as I said earlier, we've got a lot of bits of the jigsaw, like we know what GVMS is, and there are trader schemes where people can sign up to voluntarily use it to see how it works. We've seen it been working in transit because it's automated certain functions. But until we see that vast bulk of ro-ro freight moving between the EU and UK mainland, we're not going to see what it is. What we have to emphasise is GVMS is really only for what I would call road freight, whether it's accompanied or unaccompanied, and it will predominantly be impacting, I would venture, on South Coast ports. For freight from ro-ro from Scotland to Northern Ireland, yes, they will still have to be. mean, they're already using things like GVMS, and there are now customs declarations going into Northern Ireland. So in a way, the impact, I venture for you, on the 1st of January is going to be less.
So can I ask, Brian, in your experience, are businesses like yours and others ready for these possible changes that come into play from January?
Well, we view the whole thing, we just kind of exclamation of dismay, really, you know what I mean? But just with the changes. But we are getting as ready as we can be. In some ways, the no more postponing the declarations will be helpful for some items of general freight. We're hoping that it's not going to lead to bottlenecks at various ports. We've had bottlenecks at ports, just the paperwork no match, and sometimes it's good enough to get it out of the EU, but it's not good enough to import it into the UK. So what ends up happening is it ends up lying at the port. And that happened to me just this week, actually. I was importing some boats by Holland. So we're trying to get as ready as we can, but it's more about getting our customers ready as well. We need to try and pass this out and spread the kind of load. And so we need to we're doing a kind of process education amongst everybody that we currently work with, a lot of them. And that we're saying about the South Coast ports not affecting us, but will affect us in a lot of ways for our exports, because our fish primarily goes through those ports in the South England. They don't go through, because obviously there's no direct link really between Scotland and Europe. It has to go through England. So that's where we're shipping our fish, and that's all the fish. That's everything from all the Scottish sea farms, all Maui, all these big salmon producers, all coming out of Larkhall, all getting done. Either they're going air freight out of Heathrow or they're going across the channel. So we're needing to be ready to ensure that we don't incur any further delays on that route. So we're actively preparing, and we're hoping that we're going to be ready. We're just hoping it's going to be easy enough, basically.
And have you had any issues? I mean, even Northern Ireland is a domestic market, but for obvious reasons there are problems. Have you experienced problems when it comes to simply transporting domestic products from Scotland to Northern Ireland?
Definitely, it's nearly worse than importing to the continent. It's funny that there's different. Like the actual barriers seem to be unevenly applied in reality. Like, you know, for example, like importing directly into Holland is harder than importing into France. Going into Ireland is harder than going into France. It shouldn't be. It should be the same, but there's just seems to be difficulties. I could get some proper examples and send them across to you all for later on, you know, if you like, so you can sort of see. But no, it's trying to get something into Ireland, Republic or Northern is bad. You know, I mean, it's just been grim, and that's across that route, Ken Ryan. Yeah, it's not the best, frankly, in reality.
Thanks very much for Brian. I think those examples would be really helpful.
To follow Brian and Robert's suggestions and comments there, it's quite an interesting case. We've had, of course, a lot of the controls enforced at European borders, and Robert's absolutely right about the sort of bureaucratic changes, so I won't repeat what he's saying there, but what I'll talk about is the sort of physical nature of some of these changes that are being phased in next year. And now, to start with, in quite a basic term, and notwithstanding what Brian said about a lot of the Scottish exports going through English ports, for example, and obviously in the reverse, a lot of commodities that are consumed in Scotland will have come through an English or a Welsh port, for example, somewhere else in the UK. But a lot of the United's activities in Scotland is focused on containers. And apart from that, we don't, as we heard earlier, we don't have any roll-on, roll-off links. So the major challenges of facilitating border checks at Scottish ports is not perhaps as dramatic as it may be at some of the ro-ro ports in England that have been much publicised about holding trucks up for minutes or even hours to unpack and inspect goods. That said, Scottish ports still have to comply with new control regimes. Many of them are building infrastructure or preparing infrastructure to facilitate those checks. And they could be relatively light touch checks where you have environmental or port health officers inspecting things like timber or other products that are coming in. But that is all at a cost and an extra activity that we haven't had to deal with. And that requires resource not only from the port operator, but local authorities quite often in terms of environmental officers, and also, of course, costs on those traders. So making sure that Scottish trades remains viable is essential. Another positive about Scotland is that Scotland is very much an export led economy, unlike the rest of the UK, where it is heavily import balanced, etc. And those commodities that we export in Scotland, things like whiskey and fish, I think Brian mentioned aquaculture and fish is I think has been or possibly still is the #1 UK export by value, and a big bulk of that is Scottish fish and seafood products. Those products, the changes because we export much more than we import on those products. We've already had those changes come in this year, and notwithstanding those challenges that Brian articulated, we're not expecting a big dramatic move there. And then just a final anecdotal example, and I concede to Brian's frustrations with getting goods over to Ireland, but there are now, of course, different regimes in place, even on the island of Ireland. With Northern Ireland, although it's a domestic route, of course, they are applying de facto customs rules. And however, the enforcement of those rules is being done slightly differently to the Republic of Ireland. So we have seen the traffic that travels between Great Britain and the island of Ireland actually move up and hemorrhage towards Northern England and Scottish routes from the west coast of England and of course, places like Kenrine, Loch Ryan, into Belfast and Larne, more so than those services from Wales into the Republic of Ireland, which have really seen a decline in activity. So ironically, we've seen a slight uptick and an increase in activity on the GB Northern Ireland routes, which some of the Scottish ports have done rather well out of.